Hi there, and welcome to episode 69 of the Analyst Brief podcast, brought to you by the Cyber Hut. My name is Simon Moffatt, founder and research analyst at the Cyber Hut. And with me as ever, it's partner in crime, Mr. David Mahdi. David, hi, how are we doing?
Hello, hi Simon. I'm good for now. Knock on wood. Seems like influenza A is going through my house.
Oh no!
But I don't know if I already had it already. I wasn't feeling good a week and a half ago, and then it's gone one kid to the next. It would seem.
You're the start of this relay. I think you started this, but obviously passed it on. It's definitely going. We had the start of December. We had the thing touch wood, wherever wood may be for those on the cameras. I think I had it. I was the first person, but within 24 hours I was back to normal fine, and everybody else then caught it after me. So well, whatever. These things are definitely doing the rounds. But having said that, it's middle of February. To me, eternal optimist looking outside here in the UK. It is dark, I hasten to add, but it feels like spring.
That's good.
Birds are tweeting, and the light is getting lighter, and the dark is shrinking, and all this stuff. So I eternal optimist think all the bugs and winter stuff hopefully is maybe in our rear view mirrors. Yeah. At least maybe it's the end of the beginning or whatever, but it's definitely feeling spring. And as always, things don't stop in the whole tech space and identity space and cyber space. We've got a couple of interesting topics to cover off today. And why not start off with acquisition stuff? We've done a bit of acquisitions the last sort of 2 or 3 episodes. There's been obviously a few things going on there, CrowdStrike and Signal, and then a few other things there in the PAM space, Strong DM and the like. And to be honest, there's been probably a few other things which we haven't added in, which have sort of gone by the wayside. But there has been quite a lot of activity there. And one that I want to bring up this week is Semperis have gone into a definitive agreement to buy a company called MightyID. So for those who don't know either of those vendors, Semperis, the bigger acquiring vendor, been around quite a while, primarily focused, I guess, originally on sort of Active Directory environment stuff, backup, recovery, more like adding in more detailed administrative sort of management of Active Directory, which is everywhere, as we know. And clearly it's going from on-prem to Entra and the like, but they do a lot of quite fine-grained stuff around sort of ransomware protection and group policy backup and all of that sort of good stuff. And so they've gone into an agreement with MightyID. I'll bring up the press release as we're doing this. MightyID, they've been around 2 or 3 years, and one of their sort of main mantra, if you like, is all about looking at the resilience angle of identity in general. So not just Active Directory. And they've sort of introduced or part of a band of probably 3 or 4 vendors who are talking about more general identity and access management resilience. So it's the whole press release is talking about it's going to extend this resilience capability to not just AD, but obviously a whole host of different identity provider technologies. And when we talk about resilience, I think there's quite a broad spectrum of use cases here. It isn't just the sort of backup recovery stuff, is it? I think there's a lot more around sort of identity provider, sort of fault tolerance, redirection services, session management, redirection, and that sort of stuff. So press release is pretty nice, pretty clear. The whole, sit down a little bit, get rid of that one. The whole idea of acquisition extend true cyber resilience. So that's interesting. It's sort of looking at that cyber side of the fence, where I think resilience has sort of dominated. I think hybrid identity environments. So again, on-prem, cloud, but also obviously they mentioned AD, Entra, Okta and Ping, and obviously other identity providers are available. So you talk about cloud, on-prem, the whole crisis management stuff and cyber resilience is in that sort of talk track as well. Building on the hybrid AD Entra foundation. So again, people are moving from on-prem to Entra in the cloud, but obviously sometimes they have both, which is perfectly legitimate. Or they may have Entra and a Ping, or an on-prem AD and an Okta and all the other combinations.
And most complex orgs usually have multiple, as you would say, Simon, IDPs, right?
Exactly that. I think it is. If you are looking at those sort of mid to large size enterprises, you tend to have whatever. You had a lot of identity stuff, and obviously, the identity provider world. Even to this day, I still have to explain what that means. I think our audience is pretty au fait with that. But obviously, identity is more than just the IDP, more than just authenticating and creating a session and doing the directory. Yeah. However, for many organizations and for many systems, the IDP, it is the main entry point, isn't it, to both B2C and B2E applications and services, a pinch point. And if that's unavailable, things can fall apart. Anyway, so I'll bring you in here. It's, again, another that continuation of the acquisitions we've been seeing. It's a big guy going on for a small guy, as expect. I guess Semperis are an identity provider. They're not. Identity vendor, I should say. They're not like a CrowdStrike or a non-identity player. So they are embedded in this space. It seems pretty complementary based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah. I mean, I think 100% when you look at Semperis and what they've done in the AD environments, right? Calling that out, almost going after the infrastructure of identity from the outset, right? From their core vision of a company. And they came up on my radar some time ago, and I was like, wow, it's really, really necessary and needed stuff. And it, I always thought I always thought they didn't get as much like organic excitement and press as they should have, and it's probably because it's not as sexy as ITDR and agentic this and agentic that, and we're AI powered. It's like, no, this is actually like the plumbing of identity, and I think they've always been focused on that. Now with MightyID, what's really interesting, Simon, was I can't recall if it was I think it was Identiverse last year. I met up with some folks from Rubrik, and that's when they launched their first foray into identity, particularly like backup, right? So they're coming from backup, and then they got into kind of this identity resilience. And I remember I was talking to a gentleman there who was leading that initiative, and I think they said that one of their IDPs they're going to be releasing soon would be Okta, and I think they released that just at my notes. I think that was in December. So Rubrik having that, so it was interesting, right? So it's like, even though Semperis, like, this is a very, very logical acquisition in my mind that just is consistent with their vision, which is why I brought it up before. Rubrik, coming from a different angle, like the backup space, data protection, if you think about it that way, I think it's in a way they're dipping their toe in identity.
Yeah.
Semperis, the people that are over there, like, they're very deep and entrenched in identity. So it's kind of an interesting approach just to see, like, did Semperis do this as a defensive move? Or, is it, to me, it seems logical. But to someone who's just coming to this topic, they might go, oh, maybe they did it out of defense because Rubrik is in that mix. And then the last thing I'll just say is, like, look, at the end of the day, if you can't get access to your identity service, you can't authenticate, you can't get access to any of your stuff. It is the core critical infrastructure for B2C, B2B, right? Business to employee, and the employees getting access to all their stuff. It's the core of what IAM is all about. And whether it is, you're down because of an outage or you're down because of a breach, we know with the Okta breach, that was problematic. And there have been other outages in the past with big providers like Microsoft and cloud outages that you and I have talked about on the podcast. Yeah. And so the notion of being able to have some resilience, both in like your data being available, but the service itself, having backups for the service so you have maximum uptime. Number one, I should just call it out, I think this is a fantastic acquisition. Makes total sense and is very consistent with Mickey and the team over what they're doing at Semperis. It's going to be interesting to see, like, what is Okta going to do? What is Ping going to do? Are they going to get into identity resilience, if you want to call it that, in themselves? Or are they just going to say, let's just partner with them and Rubrik? I don't know. I don't know if this is going to expand this notion of resilience, but it's certainly one that a lot of CISOs and CIOs I talk to, they've wanted it for a while.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. I think I agree. I think the last sort of 2 or 3 years, I think there's back to the convergence of identity and cyber. There's a lot of, I guess, design patterns that are coming from the security world, which are now obviously sort of expected within the identity world. So ITDR is the most popular, I suppose, or identity security, where we're talking about discovery of all of your identity assets, real-time and runtime behavior monitoring, all of these things which the security world, inverted commas, sort of network security and data security, endpoint security, traditional people from a decade or plus ago, it's sort of expected. And that's filtering down. And obviously, even this press release it's using cyber resilience and identity resilience interchangeably. I think when you talk about general information security, back to the CIA triad, which we often forget about. It's quite interesting how we always forget the basics. And we're constantly reinventing the first principles. But within there, you have confidentiality, integrity, availability. Now, the availability aspect is like, oh yeah, well, it's just backups or whatever. And it's like, well, it's not at all. It's about making sure the right services are available at the right time to the right people. Now, you can sort of put things like ransomware in there. You can do particularly sort of DDoS and the complicated botnet attacks and stuff. But underneath that, there's a whole host of other stuff around misconfiguration. Configuration of CSP cloud systems is really, really tough. Removing access from somebody or a role or a team or by policy, all of that stuff really, getting that wrong is difficult, and it can knock people out of their sort of access frameworks or within their ability to do things. So there's a multi-tiered approach to this identity resilience stuff, and I think there's a couple of things happened. I think identity has become more important, absolutely. The convergence with identity, absolutely, and it's up the ante.
So when you say convergence, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Two things. One is identity it's moving from being that tactical infrastructure thing sitting under the CIO, because it's become more central. All of that information security, cyber technology on top, it's reliant on identity. So if identity is not running, your endpoint security stuff, your data decryption stuff isn't working properly, your SASE stuff isn't working. So identity just has more eyeballs and more responsibility on it, which then backs up your point around, look, if your IDP is not available, crap. Everyone's looking around going, well, the data security stuff is irrelevant. Your endpoint security stuff doesn't work. You have these sort of bottlenecks. I think there's likes of, obviously, MightyID, Accents, another company in there doing some identity resilience stuff. You can also probably put Strata Identity in there. And I do that a little bit more reluctantly, not because they don't do this stuff, but it's often a byproduct of their sort of broader Mavericks platform, with looking at migrations, on-prem to cloud migrations or cloud to cloud migrations. They can sort of provide some of that wiring and plumbing to allow you to flip-flop between regions or CSPs or whatever. So you've got Accent, Strata, and obviously now MightyID. It just amplifies that identity. It is more important. It does power more systems, but getting it wrong, or it's unavailable, ransomware, misconfig, cyber attack and or internal mistakes, as often are the case. If that identity stuff is unavailable, you need alternatives, and you need at least a plan, not necessarily to make it hot sites and you can 100% availability, but you have a plan. And especially if it's mainly looking at B2E, I guess, with the AD emphasis there. But B2C obviously has a huge issue here as well. If your online bank or your Netflix or whatever is down, it's a problem if you can't log into these things. So I think it's a maturity thing. I think resilience is important. I think MightyID, I think it looks like a perfectly complementary sort of messaging sale, at least.
There's a lot wrapped in here, and a lot that we can unpack. I think just to hit a few things that you mentioned. I mean, so on the employee side, let's get to that in a moment, because there's so much to unpack. On the consumer side, you're absolutely right. I mean, especially if it's in areas like retail, or could even be in banking too, where if the customer has other options and you're constantly slow, delayed, or certain features are always turned off because your team can't handle the risk, or you don't have the tech stack, customers are just naturally going to funnel over to other orgs that aren't down as often or at all, are easy to access, and they provide but they have the least amount of friction in doing anything, right? Friction is just it's a particular KPI that I think they should focus on, because abandoned carts or I think I probably mentioned on the podcast before, there's one bank that I bank with that I'm going to be leaving because they wanted to do some in-person IDV stuff for very basic money transfer, very low threshold. I can respect the fact that they want to protect me, but at the same time, the kind of the risk and friction, they weren't balancing that properly. They weren't using basic like IDV stuff that other banks that I use do. So I'm moving away from them, right? But on the employee side, absolutely. I mean, you that's why I was just double clicking on the convergence point. Out of all of these services that everyone uses, whether it's Slack, it's Salesforce, it's, marketing automation tools, other cloud-based tools, whether it's IaaS or it's SaaS or it's PaaS, doesn't matter what role you have in an org, you're using any of these systems, on-prem, hybrid, multi-cloud, identity is that source of trust and truth that all of these systems point to. And if that is down, everything is off the hook, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, even when you look at when I look at SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or any of these other kind of endpoint security companies or SASE, like your Zscaler or Apollo, right? A Cisco, right? And even if you take some of their identity capabilities out, it's like, well, if you're scanning a device and it's not associated with the identity system, how can you even trust it? What's the point of scanning it? You got to understand what it is, who it belongs to, what it's authorized to do, and so on and so forth. And that's where your identity system comes in. So in a lot of ways, it comes back to this system. And you're right with the CIA triad that availability is something that I think we've just taken for granted. And as we've further digitalized our systems, enriched them and empowered them with even more control and insights and resources, this is the element that I think we're missing. We have enough proof points now in the market between cloud outages, breaches that take you out, broken software updates, you name it. We've seen it all in the industry over even 2 years, Simon. Like even if we just look at 2 years, it's past the point that organizations need to do it. And when you think about it too, EU DORA, right? There's a Cyber Resilience Act in the European Union. And, most CISOs I talk to, they're like, it's probably going to be like GDPR, where we're going to see it have, replicas around the world, kind of just different instances. Because I think, what was it, a long time ago in Germany, it's maybe a decade ago, there was, I think, a German citizen that said, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be getting this wrong, but I think it illustrates the point. I think they went to sue their telco and saying that, I work remotely and I need my internet connection. My internet connection is not optional. It's what I need for a job. It's akin to the roads being available. If the road is constantly unavailable, I can't get to work. If I can't get to work, I can't do my job. If I can't do my job, that means probably other people can't do their job, which impacts the economy overall. And that is
100%,
right, a government issue. So, if we connect this to a bigger issue, it's I think regulated companies should be held accountable for this. Not just, sure, we've got market competitive nature, but I do think certain orgs, it's you're going to have my credit card information and my passport details. You need to protect it, or you're not allowed storing it. And as well with that, I should be able to access it 99.99999% of the time. So I could say, I want to exercise my right to be forgotten. If your service is unavailable and I can't exercise my right to be forgotten, that is a problem, right? And so on and so on.
No, that's a really, really good point. I think two things I want to sort of amplify that. I think absolutely spot on around the CNI thing. What we define as critical national infrastructure, and it's you think about power stations and water supply and these big sort of meta things. Well, first of all, absolutely, but they're all becoming digital and they're all becoming cyber enabled and identity enabled. So they need to have that digital resilience in there. It's absolutely spot on. But then the CNI definition is broadening, and obviously financial services is part of that. Media consumption is part of that. If there's a pandemic or a world conflict, you need to have media consumption to understand what's happening. And obviously, back in the day, you'd have a wind-up radio and you'd have a wind-up torch, and nobody has that stuff. Everything's digital. So the CNI definition spreads. So back to your point, you need to make it resilient, and obviously that isn't happening. So the likes of DORA, which is a really good catch actually, that the Online Resilience Act, that is saying, look, your stuff isn't resilient by design. It doesn't have that stuff baked into it. Hence, there's market failure. We need regulation. You need to essentially book your ideas up. But I think there's some really interesting sub points. The final thing I'll add is if you expect and if things are constantly online. So by this I mean we sort of get used to electric always being on. I live in quite an old house. We have power cuts, but it's really, really rare. Yeah. I expect broadband on, I expect electric to be on. And if it's not on, it normally comes back really, really quickly. So outages and denial of service attacks, even in cyber and digital, are often high impact but short-lived. And I think the risk, of course, is as everything is becoming often more available, you sort of forget about resilience. And you sort of forget about, oh, well, the broadband's always on, the lights are always on, it's fine. But soon as they aren't on, because there's the substation's gone, or some part of that ecosystem, that CNI ecosystem, is really, really down. There was the thing in Heathrow Airport a few months back, the substation thing. Yeah, it was the cascading impact of that was huge. So I guess what's the point I make is we are becoming more reliant on these things, but we're also sort of expectant that they're up and running, and when they're not, as we know, things can derail pretty spectacularly. So I think overall it's a pretty logical move. It looks like. I think MightyID been around for a while. You've got Accent's got Strata, probably one or two others on that resiliency sort of bandwagon there, doing some really, really interesting stuff. I only see the problem statement getting bigger. I think more organizations will need it. You mentioned something interesting earlier about sort of Okta and Ping and will they develop their own point solution. I don't think so. In honesty, I think that the reason the likes of Accent and Mighty have become popular is because they are agnostic. They are looking at that sort of hybrid mesh approach. And most big mid to large enterprise are going to have a whole host of identity kit, and it not just independent sort of deployments. Microsoft Ping, homegrown, different locations, different regions. So I think it's an augmentation to technology in the sense of it's like a layered technology. It's not just great. If you can make your Okta deployment or whatever, resilient within itself, brilliant. But that probably won't help Microsoft and it won't help Ping. So you need to have that agnostic thing. And the last thing I'll mention is I think this is going to go way, way more beyond the identity provider. I think it's going to be authorization. I think it's going to be maybe credential management. It's all the different facets of identity, and how can we find single points of failure? How can we eradicate those or reduce the impact? I think.
Yeah. I agree. I think it makes sense. And just so we've got the traditional IDPs themselves, and then even let's just say the folks that are getting into real-time runtime ITDR with Signal and CrowdStrike, and then even like Palo Alto with CyberArk. I think if you're cyber, let's call those cybersecurity platforms, and even your Cisco's, I think would it be crazy if they got into this? No, but would it make sense right now? No. And the reason why I say that is going back to when you were talking about, when you think about that full identity lifecycle, and there's the notion of ITDR and looking at behavior, and then there's governance and there's all that stuff. This is, while it is related and critical to that, I still think this is something that's off to the side. And if someone's to take on the real-time stuff and real-time enforcement, runtime enforcement, while they're also figuring out MCP and agents and all these other things, I just think it would be a lot to digest if you're taking on resilience and backups and all of that. So I think where this stands right now today is the most appropriate approach, because I think if a CrowdStrike pulled something now on that, or a Palo Alto or a Cisco, I would actually question their ability to execute on their current mandate of what they're doing. Whereas I think Rubrik and Semperis and Strata, right? I think they can focus on it in good ways. Strata, I agree with you, right? Like I think Mavericks with orchestration, transmit security, same thing with orchestration. Like you could say an orchestrator, an identity orchestration has that platform to be able to do it, but it's one of like 1,000 use cases that could be tackled with. And the bulk of the market right now, I think would see the identity orchestration as like, that might be a use case, but it's not one that I've seen that customers are coming forward. It's more of like, I want the whole journey. So
That's fair.
all that to say, I think that, like, the folks that are laser focused on this right now, I think that's really good. And I think we're only going to see this grow, as you say.
I think we will, and just I'm just in my head now thinking about things like ITDR or sort of intent monitoring stuff. As that becomes really critical, and it's still relatively early in the adoption in the sense of it's not the same as I don't know MFA or something, but as that becomes omnipresent in all of our identity worlds, you have runtime detection and you have responses. Both the detection and response become really, really important, because if you turn off the detection side of things, you've got a blind spot. Now the bad guys are smart, so if they know if to turn off the detection alarm, whatever, in the safe, they're going to be able to get to the jewels. So if as soon as ITDR and that monitoring thing becomes absolutely rolled out, mature, and dependent for the security, that's going to become a target to turn it off. And the second aspect is back to the identity and cyber convergence. The reason why that is accelerating is it gives you more weapons, to use a horrible word, in that response arsenal. Because if you do need to respond to an attack, having identity in there allows you to do a whole host of things: change sessions, change access, divert somebody to a honeypot. Disable and deprovision or whatever is a more sort of draconian step. But if somebody's in flight gaining access to something and that's bolted in, you can respond in a much more fine-grained way and change my access from read and write access to just read access because whatever, I look suspicious. Now again, if that response thing becomes so powerful and critical, it's going to get turned off, or the adversary will try and turn it off. So you need to have ways of clearly stopping that from happening, but you need to be resilient at that sort of layer as well. So I agree. I think end to end we need to think about whatever IDV, IDP, blah blah, and I guess what happens further when you sort of add in more use cases. All right, so congratulations to them. Good luck to them in their sort of continued journey and what they're trying to do next. We haven't talked about AI for at least 15 minutes, so we should probably bring that up. Just because I think that AI is
that old dog.
It's catching on a little bit. I mean, we do talk about it probably more than other things. Just there's a lot going on in the AI world. There's a lot going on in identity and AI. Dscope recently released their sort of identity hub, looking at a whole host of different things in that world. I think Beyond Identity have got some sort of new AI suite thing going on. There's a lot happening most weeks. But what I want to pull up is Teleport have just released a framework specifically for agents. I guess a quick comment on this really is a few things I find quite interesting about this. One is, so Teleport are really focusing on the infrastructure part of the sort of world, if you like. So that the CSP, almost PAMI sort of stuff there, and providing identity at that layer. And they've obviously looked at agentic as saying, look, this stuff's only as strong as what is underneath the agentic world, be that the data sources, compute power, etc. So you have this multi-tiered view of the world, and they've released a framework this last sort of week or so, and it's worth checking out. There's a lot going on in there around it's the agent side. There's the MCP side, which I think is way more than just sort of OAuth 2. You've got the model protection, and you've got a whole host of different angles around providing cryptographic identities for all of the agents that are being used. And again, quite a big, broad ecosystem of integrations, I think is nice. I guess the reason I want to comment on this is that there is a lot happening. And with Cyberport, we released a research note, would be the end of last week, looking at the 5 or 6 stages to protecting the sort of general agent world. And I guess as part of that, it isn't just the sort of OAuth 2 stuff. There's a whole host of, there's the lifecycle, authentication, authorization, but also things like the data management side of things, operational management, risk, ethics, compliance. We mustn't be just too focused on some of the sort of very low-level security components. We need to think of AI in that bigger, broader adoption within the business, because no one's going to stop this juggernaut. It's going to continue being adopted, shadow systems, homegrown systems, because the value of what AI can bring is just, as we know, hugely exponential and rising currently. So we do need to have some really good, broad discussions around not even just agentic, but AI in general, around compliance and ethics and usage and how that should be governed. But obviously, from our perspective, from an identity world, I think the agent stuff, it has and will create some really, really unique problems around non-deterministic behavior, ephemerality of things, agents coming and going, the strong authentication angle. How do you deal with that? Is it just certs, or is there something else? We just mentioned behavior monitoring there as well. So there's a lot going on. I think that there's more to it, I guess, is what my concern is than just looking at Auth 2.
I think so. I agree with that, and I think what Teleport is doing here is really well in line with what the market needs. I think we need to go to standards here, and I think it's good that we're looking at MCP. That was kind of led by Anthropic and like open sourced, I guess. And then we have some others, but it'd be good to see, FIDO Alliance and others. I believe they're going to be looking at tackling this stuff too, right? I mean, they did a lot, obviously, with passwordless FIDO and passkeys, right? And we're still kind of going through passkeys, but that's all been human centric. It's all been user consumer centric, right? And even that actually I've seen a lot more consumer use cases of passkeys, for example, than enterprise. And I think we need to see more enterprise penetration of passkeys.
Yeah.
All the while, right, a lot of the agent stuff. One of the things that I'm not seeing, just because in my world, I spend a good amount of time looking at, customer identity, partner identity, these types of things. So like these external identities that you want to let in, you want to give them access to things, resources, but you're kind of managing them in many ways with one or two arms tied behind your back, because you can't, do everything, because they don't sign like the same kind of big acceptable use policy as an employee would, right? A lot of the stuff I'm seeing with agents right now, it's going in a good direction, but you're right. We need to get more detailed about stuff, more consistent approaches, so that if any company builds anything around this, it has max interoperability. I'm not seeing a lot of actual emphasis on the customer side, right? So for example, like there's a lot of this stuff going on about agents that you might be using within your own environment. Okay, like that's obviously important, and let's continue that path, right? It's a lot of work to do. But what about agents that an organization can't fully control? What about Simon as a British Airways customer, that now he's using his browser, or he's using OpenClaw or something that's going to go and do things on his behalf? Should you just block those outright? Mm-hmm. My view is I would say, like, depends, but probably no. And the reason why is because I think as LLMs and other agentic tech start to get embedded more in browsers, in the OSs themselves, consumers are just going to expect to open up their phone and talk to their phone and say, get me flights from here to here, this price range, here to here to here. And if you are British Airways and you don't show up on that list, it's just like akin to not showing up in a search results. Maybe probably worse, because if it's automated and I'm busy and I'm so used to this now, I'm not going to a website anymore necessarily. I'm talking to my agent, and my agent is going off and doing stuff for me. So what I've seen is, like, number one, I strongly believe that is going to be one of the biggest threat avenues, because companies can't control it, because I think they will start to see traffic patterns start to change. And if consumers that are using these tools are blind to your service, you're going to lose business. And I think we'll see that fairly rapidly. And then the last point, Simon, is consumers, again, like I was saying, you'd have much less red tape. I mean, what's to stop me right now from using Comet or Atlas, even just those, or OpenClaw, and asking it to interface with Discord or British Airways or whatever? Yeah. There's nothing to stop me from using those tools and doing it. It's those providers. How are they going to do it? Can they be good stewards and say, hey, you know what? We really have to move to passkeys now, because I don't want Simon to just give his credentials to OpenClaw, or to his agent. Like, I want him to be a part of the loop so he can authenticate still as a human, and or in lieu of a consistent industry standard, have a way to authenticate the agent itself so that I know it's Simon, but yeah, maybe I still need to do a human generated assertion to say, yeah, I'm approving the fact that I want to buy this flight for British Airways. So I like the approach. I think we need to continue down that path. The blind spot today, in my view, from what I've seen, because I've also heard practitioners say there's not a lot of research on browsers, for example, and how that's going to impact our customer facing environment. The market is very hot to trot on enterprise stuff, which it's appropriate. But we need to also spend those time and calories on the other user personas, if you will.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think this we did a really good time progress diagram around AI adoption in general, and it's the AI innovation curve is huge, hugely accelerant and exponential. But obviously the security and identity innovation is much lower. So you end up with this gap between identity and security growth and adoption and AI growth and adoption, which is whatever. So you have this big security gap. Now, I think that what you described there fits into that area, because people are driven by incentives organizationally and as consumers. So as soon as you start to see huge benefit and power of whatever it could be OpenClaw, we'll probably touch on that in a sec, or chatbot accelerant or whatever it is in that B2C space, that spreads, and it spreads like wildfire because of referral and because of you tell your mates and all the rest of that stuff and how B2C works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like ChatGPT. It is product led.
Exactly. So you can't
rise in the enterprise. Yeah.
You can't stop that back. So I think there's a whole host of problems there around how to secure it, how to manage it, how to operationally make it efficient. And I think standards clearly are part of that. My worry about standards is you often sort of wait until they are ready before they're ready, and they're never at. OAuth 2 is not ready yet. OAuth 2 2.1 came out because OAuth was just everywhere. So it's a real an issue with our standards for me. I think there are parts of agentic as well. It's a lifecycle thing. So you got Spiffy for your process attestation, I should say, and then obviously then downstream Auth. Maybe FIDO and passkeys for humans, and maybe translate that into some other derived usage as well. Yes, OAuth 2 somewhere in there, and whatever CBA and other parts of OAuth 2 may be useful. But I think it's all a little bit disjointed and fragile for me.
That's what I feel.
I guess just to extend that a little bit, there's been let me share this one as well. There's been quite a lot of talk of OpenClaw. You mentioned OpenClaw. Maybe give us a skinny your sort of your view on OpenClaw. I guess for those who don't know, it's bringing it up here for those who are watching us on video. But OpenClaw, it's the AI that actually does things according to their website, OpenClaw.ai. It's had a few name changes, which I think in itself has caused a little bit of a security worry. It's had a few different variants of its name, which I think in turn has then created a load of phishing sites and phishing campaigns that have sort of domain squatted on its previous incarnations, which I think has caused a bit of consternation. But what's your view on OpenClaw, Dave? This is one you've been looking at, I think.
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, I should just say to our audience, if you haven't been following it, don't feel bad. I mean, as Simon was saying, it's pretty new. It's pretty new. It's very new, and it's moving very quickly. But it's just basically like a framework, and there's plenty of videos already on YouTube of folks buying Mac Minis and just dedicating a Mac Mini to running OpenClaw, giving it full access to stuff so it can. I mean, if you scroll down on the website, even if you zoom in there, Simon, on the works with everything, for example, from like WhatsApp to Discord to calendar to email to all sorts of things. Pretty much think about your endpoint and what your endpoint can do, what you do as a human on your endpoint, right? It can do, right? And going beyond scripts, obviously, and robotic process automation, it's got like an AI brain, let's say. And so then it's able to use all of those learnings to learn if a small error comes up, it can reference the error and say, oh, it's because I missed a field, or there's it timed out because a server timeout, right? Like, so it's smart enough that it will go and navigate and go within the ways that you give it. The challenge with it is that it was done more with a, and Simon, you know how I say this, right? It's done more with a productivity mindset versus a security and privacy first mindset, and identity first security mindset. So meaning that you give it rights, you give it root access, you give it credentials, and it will do what you ask it to do. And it's going to take some kind of non-deterministic approach, right? And it might have different pathways to achieve its goal each time. The challenge is that, and I think a lot of security major brands have already written blogs and commented on it, is that it is a, I don't want to say it's a dumpster fire, but some will say that. It's very much a big caution right now because it just runs and it doesn't have that baseline. So even if you think you've protected everything, it may find a pathway because, hey, it's trying to find the least path of resistance, and like water, it'll find leaks in something and it might find a way to get access to an API key or a secret, or, it uses one identity to do something else, right? And so on and so on and so on. So it's really interesting. I like how it demonstrates how powerful this stuff is. And I think it gives us a glimpse of where things are going, but it also gives people like us a glimpse of what's missing.
100%. I don't want to sort of comment too much on it, really. I think it's going to evolve and see how it goes. But I guess it's a really good example, and there's a showcase page which shows what people are building, and that to me is quite indicative as to the power, because it's all pretty big stuff. Someone's given access to WhatsApp, full access to your LinkedIn, full access to your SMS, and to your everything. Basically, it's pretty much it is that.
Actually, if you scroll up for a sec, keep going, but scroll up. Or down a bit.
Which one?
Right there with the Mac Mini.
Oh yeah.
See,
That's
I think what I was talking about.
But I think that clearly it's not full admin, and it's like we'll give over my entire life to this model or to this process, and the productivity could be huge. You clear your inbox from 10,000 emails to nothing, all this sort of carry on, which you need full access to do that. So there's that whole impersonation, confused deputy flow. But I guess my final point on this is the productivity benefits are astounding. So again, the innovation adoption, us or whoever talking about security and credentialing and the confused deputy problem, it's like, whatever. Look what it's done. It's cleared my inbox to zero. So you can't argue with that level of productivity. No, so I think
you're right.
It's a really good exemplar of petrol on the fire. It's going to go wild. Woo, it's great. But then at some point, it's going to have to be peeled back. And peeling it back is going to be a damn sight more difficult than building the security and the identity from the beginning. Time will tell where that goes. I'm sure there's going to be other competitive or other sort of different projects there. But another example of AI on the
just mention something quick, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because I know we don't have all day. But just when you look with Anthropic's release last week that kind of tanked the software stocks, it was when they released that legal tool. And basically, the gist of it all, if you take 20 steps back, is, hey, anyone can vibe code now. So any company in the world that wants to write software, they don't necessarily, this was kind of it was a ridiculous message, but this is the point they were trying to say. And what I think traders took was, well, why would you need ServiceNow or Salesforce when you can just vibe code your own CRM? You could vibe code your own ITSM platform.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in theory, you could. I spent a good chunk of my holidays just messing around building a MyFitnessPal kind of variant. It took multiple hours. I don't understand all the code in it, anymore because it's gotten too big. And it's going to be very difficult to maintain. And then when we get into security and all this stuff, and just again, why I'm connected with OpenClaw, these issues, AI is not going to solve these issues today. Maybe a while from now, I think we'll do that, but we don't even understand all the stuff it fully does and the full risk ramifications of all of it now today. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because it's exciting, but I think we need to kind of turn the excitement dial back a bit so we can understand these benefits properly. But you're right, Simon. I'll end off in just saying the carrot is very juicy, and I think we'll just jump towards it and take a big bite out of it. We also get,
I think unfortunately we are going to have to feel the pain. I think because it's the adoption is not going to stop, so there has to be some significant issues with that. So, all right. On that note, we'll leave it there. I think obviously identity and security has a huge role to play in the adoption. I think ironically as well, getting identity and security right will allow the proper enablement of this stuff and allowing people to trust it more. And if you can trust it more, it will do more and it will proliferate in that respect. So I do think there's huge benefits of getting identity and security, privacy as well, getting all of that done correctly. Dave, thank you forever for sharing your words of wisdom. We'll see you in a few weeks' time whether we can do the whole podcast with an OpenClaw or whatever, or some sort of augmented. maybe we get an AI guest or something. I need to work on that. Get some sort of AI bot and have a conversation. Cool. So if they think that possibly, but we'll see. Make ourselves redundant possibly. But Dave, thank you for sharing your words of wisdom. Thank you, of course, to our audience wherever you are in the world. This has been episode 69 of the Analyst Brief podcast. And this has been real, physical people talking, and maybe in the future it's going to be augmented. We shall see. But wherever you are in the world, stay safe, and we will see you next time.